start.
You can hear
I
me
know
well,
Clicks.
right,
He's
Greens?
the one offering moderation, but he's the one who spurgs mainly. But it's fine, Clicks. Anyways, are you all ready?
You're gonna go, Goons?
Yeah, it's a recording. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, my character just reaches into the timeline and just your character ceases to
Wait, I
exist.
don't care about your premise yet. What's your position, just to be clear?
That is my position. I think my character beats you by reaching into the timeline and removing your character from existence.
Okay, so your premise is that he reaches into the timeline and removes my character's existence. What's the argument for that?
Well, here we go. Where should I post it? VC scans?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or do you want me to start first?
Go to. I'm starting first. Go to VC scans. Goons, can you see this? Yeah. Dr. Manhattan goes and reaches into the DC timeline and removes 10 years and just like makes people cease to exist.
Which scan says that?
It's the scan I just posted right now.
Yeah, what part of the scan?
You could read the bottom part of the scan, but it's the whole scan. It's explained in the whole scan if you just read it and take a second to read it. So
yeah, you didn't have to add nothing to you. But anyway,
it's fine.
So why is it
I'm not even trying to spur?
timelines? Yeah, you can be muted. I don't understand why you feel the need to interrupt me already.
There's no reason to spur confident. You could relax.
Yeah, so nobody's spurting. You're interrupting me when you realize I'm about to defeat your scan.
Talking to you casually. I don't understand what's wrong with you.
Already doing the dumb shit. He's already doing the ape shit.
I'm not aping. Like it's so clear. Like please relax.
I was gonna say I should probably clarify something because I don't want to moderate like falsely. Do you guys like want me to not like stick moderate, but close to stick moderate, like mute someone if they interrupt instantly, or do you just want me to mute someone if like the arguments become unintelligible for like the audience?
If they mute it instantly, I'm not trying to spurg with this dude. That's all he does.
Listen, I'm like Archie. I'm not spurging. I'm not doing any of that right now. It's very obvious that he makes a comment and I just casually responded to it. I'm not aping. I don't know if you think I'm aping. I'm not aping. Okay, you see, he's cut me off. I'm not even talking.
Yes, because I'm applying your logic.
That's why I was asking. Okay, what do both of you feel comfortable with?
I don't think
stick moderation.
Okay, I don't think stick moderation is necessary if we just relax.
Wait, that's fine.
What we're doing, like Archie, what I'm doing right now, like. Well, okay, I don't know why he's still talking, but what I'm doing right now, which is just a casual back and forth, like
I don't understand why you're being retarded.
Like you see what I mean, Archie? Like it's not me, it's him. He has an issue. I don't understand. Like you can just try to gaslight the VC, but what I'm trying
to just like, how about this? Are both of you guys comfortable if I just mute when your arguments become unintelligible, or if someone's just violently cutting in, like for spurging reasons?
I just want to get my
like I'm okay, like
make comments.
All right.
I'm okay with like unnecessary like interruptions, but like if I'm like casually responding to him and the comment that he makes towards me, like I don't think that should be like a parameter to me.
Yeah, but the comment was going to be inclusive of my argument, retard. But you didn't let me finish.
Okay, but I'm letting you progress. Like I'm not stopping you from talking.
How about this? Now that there's like a consensus between the both of you, it was just a misunderstanding. How about we let Infinity like continue or respond to what you're saying?
Yeah, so thank you. So yeah, Jester, what's the argument as to why the timelines within DC or whatever comic this is equivalent to the timelines within any other series? If the timelines have specific properties in which allows them to do this, and those properties do not equivocate to any other verse, there's no reason as to why his ability would be effective on other timelines. Go ahead.
Well, in general, usually we set parameters like this beforehand in debate. But the consensus between, and I have two responses to this. The consensus between these type of VSBW debates is that we kind of equalize the setting.
Whoa! I'm not agreeing to VSBW. What the fuck? This nigga tried to slip that shit.
Wait, stop. We don't have to. Okay, yeah, we don't have to agree to VSBW. I'm just explaining something. Usually, when people engage in versus battle debates, I'm not saying the site itself. We usually equalize the setting where it's like we equalize energy sources and just kind of have a neutral playing field to say, oh, I'm from a different verse, so this wouldn't work here. That's like a consensus or something that's usually accepted. But regardless of the line, you'd have to, point out something so unbelievably different of how time flows in your universe versus mine.
Fuck?
Can you do that?
Okay, so please let me respond to both of those retarded claims you made. One, when you're talking about the normative claim, I want the justification for that. Even if I grant it is normative, the normative claim that I'm granting would be the fact that we do equalize consistently the power sources. But whether or not the power sources equalize is distinct from whether or not the timelines or systems within the verse or within the reality of the verse are equivalent. So I can equalize, for example, magic and mana, but whether or not that's equivalent to me equalizing the cosmological structure of both verses, that is a complete different topic of conversation. That's retarded. And then another thing is, what is the argument as to why we should accept that assumption? And then we can go to the other point that you made after, by the way.
I wasn't giving an argument. That was just a statement. And then I want you to respond to the second thing. And also, I want to make a comment on if you're okay with
Okay, what do you
equalizing,
think the
wait,
second
stop,
thing
don't
is?
interrupt me, don't interrupt me, don't interrupt me, don't interrupt me. So the first thing wasn't wasn't an argument. It was a statement. So why I'm confused as to why you're making that argument. The second one was me asking you just what is so different about the timeline in your verse that says like, oh, he can't do this here, right? But what I
Okay,
really want to
maybe.
get to is that
Look,
if
look,
you're
look. So
okay,
maybe you're a little bit.
I'm not trying to shotgun you, and you can respond to all of this right now. If you're okay with magic and mana and energy being equalized in a verse and that being okay, generally accepted, I could show you right now a scan of DC of the timeline and causality having the same properties as magic. Can I show you that?
Okay, can you please be my response to the first thing? I'll answer that question after. So, in response to the first thing that you just made, I don't need to point out any distinction, any relevant distinction at that between the timelines in your verse and the timelines within my verse. Your original premise, everybody in chat, I want you to listen. His original premise was the following: my character would just be able to pull your character out of his timeline and erase him from existence. I want the argument as to why he can do that. That presupposes that the ability is effective on the timelines in your verse is the same as the timelines in my verse. It is only the case that your premise is true if the ability is effective on both timelines. You're presupposing that there is no distinction, and even at that, a relevant distinction between the timelines at hand. Whether or not I need to point out a contradiction or a distinction, I don't need to do that at all. Nobody believes I need to do that, but
Okay, Infinity.
and yes, you can send that, by the way. Yes.
Yeah. So, and before I send that, I'm gonna ask you this: Are characters fighting on different timelines, or no?
I don't know what properties. Let me answer that. I don't know what properties the timelines within your verse has. So let's say the timelines in my verse has X, Y, and Z, while the
Okay,
timelines
that's
in
not
your
the
verse has
question.
X, Y, and Z and B, and then that last property, which is B, is what the ability affects and which allows him to take the characters out and erase them. So
Yeah, I thought that was yeah. I'm gonna appeal to the judge here real quick.
hey,
So
that's fine. You
Goons,
can think it's rap,
no,
but
no,
that
no. I'm not. So I'm gonna tell Goons this. So in a versus battles debate, since we've set no legitimate parameters or like
brother,
rule
why does
set,
this dude stutter every single?
I'm not stuttering. I don't know what he keeps interrupting, and I'm just chill talking. So Goons, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So usually in a versus battle debate, we do establish some type of parameters, and when we equalize stuff, like he's even okay with equalizing like magic and energy and stuff like that. But
Oh,
for our characters to
whoa.
interact, we'd have to be moving in the same type of time flow. So the issue that I'm seeing here, he's trying to say, oh, time flows differently, or it's possible time flows differently in my thing. Why is it the same here? It doesn't make any sense since our characters are fighting in the same location. So we should, in theory, as a default, the timeline should be equalized because we're like we have to interact with each other in some sort of way. So,
Right. So you're saying like generally when you're having these discussions, there's like norms that are accepted that just sort of control for like the time thing, right? So you're already like assuming, you're saying that you're already like assuming that they're in the same like timeline or whatever.
because that's the only way our characters would be able to, that's how we have a versus battle in the first place. But you could you know.
Okay. What's your response, Infinity?
Okay, so goons, maybe my opponent has some type of cognitive dysfunction, but I'm going to speak to you real quick. So one, I asked for the argument for the normative assumption. He made the claim that I granted the normative assumption. I gave a hypothetical because I'm just that good. I said if I were to grant the hypothetical or the normative assumption, all that entails is that there's equivocation in power systems. Not equivocation is systems in which codifies what's in the verse. That is distinct. A timeline is not equivalent to a power system. So I don't know if you watch any anime, but if someone like, for example, Dragon Ball Goku has ki and then Naruto has magic or chakra, I would say we can equivocate that if I were to grant his retarded ass normative assumption. However, we're not equivocating the cosmological structure, which the timelines will be inclusive of. Now, when we're talking about interactive power between the two fighters, that does not require the same timeline. The timeline itself is what codifies hybrid points within the setting. The timeline itself is not time. Those are two different things. So I grant that they will be in the same time frame if they're on the same dimensional tier, whatever we're talking about. If they're on the same dimensional axes, they will be in the same time frame. But whether or not the ability will be effective in that specific hypothetical time frame is a different topic of conversation. So when he makes the claim that we accept these assumptions, nobody accepts these assumptions other than his retarded ass calm, which is filled with niggas like Dad Boy and shit. What the fuck? Give the argument as to why it's normatively assumed. Go ahead.
Okay. There's a couple problems with that. The first one, if he grants the fact that we're in the same time frame without the cutting out the unnecessary yap, the character he's assuming that is just some type of like cosmological interaction. All the claim was that he could reach into a timeline and remove 10 years from it, right? So if they're in the same time frame, he'd have to point out some significant difference between the flow of time in his verse, because at the same point, if we have to interact in the same time frame, something has to be equalized, right? So our timelines have to merge. are some type of magical properties have to merge, which I said I could show him a scan of, the magical properties like connective energy, like being a part of like literally everything in DC, which creates like the whole universe, right? So that's why I said that. Would you like to see a scan of that, Infinity?
Okay, so just to be clear, Goons, I've already said this, but maybe you weren't listening, so I'll repeat it for you and Jester because my point has a lack of tracking. But I don't need to point out anything. His premise makes the assumption that these timelines are equivalent. However, if the ability is only effective on X, Y, and Z B timeline, while my timeline is X, Y, and Z, then the ability would not be effective. So like I said, there can be some type of property in the system of timelines within this verse that allows the ability to be effective, while that property does not exist in the same system of timelines within my verse. He has yet to justify any irrelevant. He has yet to justify there not being a distinction between the two timelines. I don't need to justify that there being a distinction between the two timelines because he made that original assumption. And for the other thing, yes, you can show that.
Okay. To address all that garbage that was ridiculous. So again, for our characters to be interact, the reason why it's just generally accepted for us to be in the same merge timeline and why that's perfectly acceptable is
Oh
because
my
there's
god,
no other
this
way
dude
for our
is so
characters to.
retarded. It being in the same
Okay,
verse.
can you answer? Okay, yeah, that's called verse equalization, which you granted a part of earlier. I know you want to debate on a time frame and a timeline. If they're in the same time frame, then from different verses crossing over, something must have merged for this to be possible in the first place. That's why we're having this VSBW discussion in the first place. There's no reason to even interact or get on this type of semantical debate. But I could show you the scan right now, and then let me just grab the scan real quick.
Okay.
Because so Goons,
Hey, everybody,
wait,
everybody.
I want to ask some Goons a question. So you remember him saying earlier he's okay with like the magic and the power system being equalized?
Yeah. Infinity, he can correct me if I'm wrong. But he said there's some sort of like granted equivocation there, but he's not granting like the time equivocation, right? And then
Okay,
wait. Goons. Let me clarify since y'all are talking about what I said. I said even if I were to grant the normative assumption, the only thing that will be equivocated is the power system, not the cosmological structures which the timeline is codified within. Now, I do not grant the normative assumption that there is verse equalization. I've said this 3 times. I don't know why my opponent is hard-headed or some shit like that. And then another claim that I would like to address is the fact that they exist in the same timeline. No, when we're talking about hypothetical fights such as Luffy versus Goku who exist in different verses, we create some type of hypothetical or imaginative realm and where they battle in. They exist in the same verse. Whether or not they exist in the same timeline is a different point of contention. I never granted the fact that they exist in the same timeline. I said they can exist in the same timeline because there's no logical contradiction in two characters who share the same dimensional axes existing in the same timeline. However, you're presupposing that there is no distinction between the axes that your character upholds and the axes that my character upholds. So I don't care about these retarded ass presuppositions. Do you have an argument? I'm going to answer for everybody in chat since you seem to dodge all my questions. No, he doesn't have an argument. He can't track.
so
He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Please send the scans, retard.
Okay. He's gonna continue yapping, but it's no problem. By default, what you just
Is that all
explained.
you say? Yap, yap,
No,
yap, yap,
I
yap.
mean
My
he's gonna
nigga,
keep
give him
interrupting me. It's no problem. So he's the one trying to say I'm disparate, but it's no problem. By default, what you've just like outlined is a sort of verse equalization. For us to have these VSBWs, yes, we need to create these hypothetical like parameters for these characters to interact, which is why they would be in the same timeline. All I pointed out was that my character could reach into a timeline and grab it and then remove like years from it, right? You're saying that there's a problem with this. What there should be no reason you could do this to your character because there's some different x axes or whatever it is. There's some, there's different properties of your timeline versus mine. But again, for our characters by default, by like literally by default to be able to interact, we'd have to be in the same timeline. And on the same timeline that we're on, since we're merged, we're in this hypothetical situation, you'd have to give me a significant reason, or if there were some significantly different properties of how time flows in your verse, which would make it impossible for my character to not do that. Again, it's just a regular hacks he has.
This dude is actually retarded. Oh my god. He keeps on saying it's necessary that I need to point out some type of relevant distinction or irrelevant distinction. I don't need to do that. What is the argument as to why I need to do that? You keep on answering the original question, but you're not answering this new question in which I brung up multiple times. What is the argument as to why I'm the one who needs to point out the distinction, Jester? I said it slow so you can get through your fucking stick skull, idiot. And another thing is, A timeline I don't grant. There's no reason as to why they have to exist in the same timeline to have interactive power. If my character exists outside of timelines, for example, then he does not have to exist in your timeline for him to interact with you in some way, because he can have an ability that allows him to exist outside of timelines while destroying your character or whatever. Can you
That's a
please stop
different.
talking? I was muted. Yeah, Archie, can you please mute him?
You don't have to mute me. I'll stop talking. Go ahead.
I was muted instantly. I don't understand why Jester is still
Because you were
unmuted.
spragging, but continue.
Hey, that's fine. I was talking the
I was
same
gonna say,
amount as you.
I only muted you instantly because like you were like kind of yelling.
Yeah, you were
But
spragging.
Okay,
I'll,
sure, that's fine.
give him some
Anyways,
courtesy.
so I grant the consequent. We both agree on the consequent, which is that he's able to pull people out of their timelines and then erase them from existence or erase 10 years, whatever. But the antecedent is the point of contention. How he infers this consequent or whatever P is the point of contention. So I want you to answer this question. What is P? How does this work? What is the timeline's properties? If the ability is contingent upon the timeline's properties and the properties are not equivalent to any other versus properties, you cannot say this is effective against my character, i.e. that means your premise would not go through. Simple as that.
Okay. So goons, all I define a timeline as, and I guess we're gonna have to put specific definitions. Is just a.
I don't care about what you define it as. I care
He's
about what the
burging.
verse defines it as.
He's burging. And and this is the default assumption for what a timeline is. There is no specific definition for a timeline. If at least he's assuming that, then you have to prove that and go into DC and find it itself. But this is the default definition for what a timeline is. It's just a chronological order of events. For our characters to be able to interact, goons, and I hope you're hearing me. For our characters to be able to interact, there has to be a setting where we're undergoing a chronological order of events, right? And my character is able to interact with that. Now, he was saying that, oh, it could be possible that his character is outside the timeline. That's an argument for why he would be unaffected by the hacks that we'd go in later on. But that has nothing to do with what we're doing right now. Now, at the default, our two characters, no more characters, have to interact in some sort of setting. If he's saying we're undergoing a time frame, we're under the same time frame. That's a concession that we're under some merged timeline. By definition of what it is.
So what you're saying is, like, given the definition of timeline, which is just a chronological series of events or whatever, if you're granting that they do fight, then you're like implicitly granting that they're on the same like timeline. Is that what you're saying?
That's why we agree with the default. Unless and then it would be different if his character is like, oh, outside of it, then you have to prove that. Then we get to arguing like why my character can't do that to him.
So, okay, then Infinity, what's your response?
Okay, yeah, just to be clear, Goons, he said that for them to have interactive power, they have to exist in the same timeline, meaning it's a necessary claim. However, if there's an ability, or at least in some possible world, my character has an ability that allows him to interact with his character while they do not exist in the same timeline, what does that mean, Goons? That means the necessary claim is now defeated. It isn't necessary if it doesn't exist in all possible worlds. There is a possible world where my character has an ability due to there not being a P and not P. Therefore, guess what, everybody? It isn't necessary. When you say something has to be the case, you're saying it is necessary. You're not saying it's possible. So when you grant that there is a hypothetical where my character has a hacks that allows him to disclose himself from the timeline but still have interactive power with my character or your character, that means it isn't necessary. Stop using words that you don't know the meaning of. Another thing is, I don't know what the fuck it means for a definition to be default. I want you to give the definition that the series expands upon and that is contextually supported. I don't care about your retarded ass Timu Aristotle definition of what a timeline is. I want you to give an actual accurate depiction of how to define timeline within the verse. Go ahead.
Okay. To respond with him, I already addressed that second part, goons. I'm not, so to make it super clear, I'm not being hyper literal. I'm just saying that, under regular assumptions of a versus battle, they're operating under some type of structure.
Why are they assumptions, dumbass?
Okay. Are you done?
Okay, Goons, I know you're not retarded. You can.
I'm about to address
his
his
arguments.
I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm about to address himself.
Like, what the fuck?
Can we get a moderator? Is this guy spurging or this is insane?
Hey, I was like, I didn't know if you were gonna let him like respond to goons or not.
He's just crashing out. It's okay. But what's really clear is that I really in my earlier explanation, I don't know why he tries to gaslight. In my earlier explanation, I already covered if he's talking about that his character is outside of this timeline property, I'm okay with that, and that's something that we would engage with later. But at the normal, when we haven't presented any arguments for our characters, and we're just two normal characters without presented any like legitimate like hacks or properties of the characters yet, the characters are interacting. I understand, and I made it really clear that I'm okay with the possibility of his character's outside of timeline and it's acausal, right? Because my character has a whole bunch of shit like that too. I'm perfectly okay with that. But I'm saying at the normal, right? When I'm saying my character could do this, he's saying, oh, what about this? Is he able to do to your character? And he started talking about getting really semantical with the timeline stuff, goons. At the default, what it is, the reason why I say it, because if we're in a merged time frame, which is what he said earlier, he concedes to us being the same timeline, and I'm okay with that. Now he'd have to, prove that his character is outside of time. Now that'd be his burden, and to respond to the stuff earlier. Actually, I don't even think I need to yet. I think we've covered up to that so far. No, Goons?
Okay, sure. What's your response, Infinity?
Yeah, so in translation, he was going to respond to what I said. He realized that he didn't track what I said, so he acted like he didn't need to respond to it. Another thing is, Goons, I want to ask you a question. If it follows that an ability is only effective against a system which has the following properties, X, Y, and Z, while in the hypothetical verse, the system only has X and Y, would that ability be effective against the system, yes or no?
It seems like it's possible that it could not be effective.
Okay,
If that's it.
yes, thank you. So even if I were to grant, which I don't know why he keeps on saying I do, I never granted that the timelines are merged. I granted that the verses are merged into a hypothetical imaginative space in which they can interact with each other if they're on the same axes or on the same tier. I never granted that the timelines itself are merged. But even if I grant that the timelines are merged, whether or not they're able to interact with each other is completely distinct from whether or not this ability will be effective against my character. So let's say you have an ability that's only effective against people with magic and my character doesn't have magic. If verse equalization isn't granted, what you keep on saying is normatively assumed and granted, which you have yet to give an argument for, if verse equalization isn't granted, it would not follow at all that the character's ability that you're talking about will be effective against my character since my character doesn't have mana. However, since this character has a punch in which does not require the opponent to have mana to use, then yes, your character can interact with my character in that specific way. So yes, there's distinct ways to interact with characters. If your character has an ability that's contingent upon my opponent or their opponent having an ability that they don't have, then no, it would not work. However, if you have a punch in which isn't contingent upon whatever power system they have within the verse, then yes, the punch can work. Now, please, can conclude? You're just chatting.
Okay. I'm gonna address everything you said. You can hear me clearly, right, Goons?
Yep.
Okay. So to get that clear, in his own explanation, he's explaining that our verses are merging in some type of hypothetical setting. He literally just explains to you what verse equalization on. My definition, which he never disputed, of what a timeline is, would coincide with what he literally just explained right now. So he just basically conceded to me what I'm arguing for the entire time. All I'm arguing for is that my character can interact with that. So if our characters are on the same axes and they're undergoing these flow of events, my character can interact with that. It'd be his burden later on to prove why his character wouldn't be affected by this. What he literally just explained right now was verse equalization by not arguing verse equalization, which I find ridiculous. To the earlier stuff that you were saying that I wanted to address later about me giving an explanation for time in my verse, there is no real explanation for how time flows in a verse. We again just assume the default,
Nice
which is just
concession.
which is just, okay. I don't know why he's spurging out. He's crashing out. Yeah, there's no like legitimate definition for we literally just assume the default is humans on Earth who undergo a casual flow of time, so we just go with the default, which is how time flows here, unless like something is specifically stated in some like crazy different dimension. But on the normal, it's just like a regular like a sequence of events. You know what I'm saying? So if our characters are undergoing a sequence of events, we're on the same timeline. That's my definition. He argued for first equalization, and yeah, it's okay. So you'd have to, it's his burden to prove why his character is not interactable with in that sort of way.
Okay, so you're saying that when they do interact, it is the case that your character would win, right?
Yeah, if they're on the same axis, which is like what the possibility is. If they're on the same axis, his character is like not like a causal or some crazy shit. And he's saying that we merge the verses into some like equalized location, or we merge the verses in like this hypothetical location. Since our characters, if they're on the same axis, they're undergoing a sequence of events against each other, which makes this versus battle possible, which verse equalization makes the versus battles possible. We would literally by definition is that we have to assume they're undergoing a sequence of events because that's how that's happening, unless his character is like crazy magic or some shit, which you have to prove, right? And then my character can interact with that sequence of events and remove them from existence. That's all I'm explaining. So you'd have to prove why his character is immune to that now.
Vader mistake 1. Tracking issue notebook pad 8. Yanni section. I don't need to justify anything currently. I agree that there's a condition if they exist on the same axes, they can potentially interact with each other. That's not the hypothetical. What you said was they have to interact with each other for it to be a timeline and for it to be a cross-verse netting. That is the claim that you made. Now you're hedging and changing it to a conditional because I beat you the fuck up on that retarded ass claim that you made originally. Anyways, I never granted verse equalization. Stop saying that. Secondly, when you say when you're saying there's no grounded definition in the verse, okay, my nigga, that's your fault. If we cannot determine conclusively what they mean whenever they say timeline, then we cannot determine conclusively whether or not the ability would affect my character within the series or within a hypothetical verse. You saying it's normatively assumed is just a low tier tactic. Oh, well, why should I accept X? It's normatively assumed. Why should I accept Y? It's normatively assumed. What is the argument as to why it's normatively assumed? And two, what is the argument as to why we should accept normative assumptions in hypothetical cross-verse debates? There is no argument. I'm going to keep saying that. There is no argument. There is no argument. There is no argument. I'm going to keep on saying that until you understand it, Jester. Please give an argument for any proposition you've made. All you do is repeat yourself. You repeat the original proposition. You have yet to give any justification. If you don't even know what the fuck that is. But anyways, hold on.
So
I'm
okay.
not done.
So
I'm
Goons,
not done. Can you please mute him?
okay,
I'm not done
continue.
yet. I'm
Well,
not done
I'm
yet.
not. I'm not
done
talking.
yet. Can you please mute him? Wait, that's fine. You can be muted though. Yeah. So just to be clear, Goons, a verse is just the cosmology they exist in. If there's, I don't understand why he was unmuted. Anyways, a verse
not
is
talking.
just the realm in which they exist in. The timeline exists in the verse. The timeline is not the verse, everybody. The timeline is distinct from the verse. So just because they exist in the verse does not mean they exist in the same timeline. So would you like to conclude, Jester?
Okay. I think you just filled up your argument with a bunch of jargon by agreeing with me. So I'm just gonna, address a
Anyways,
bunch.
that shit was
I'm
never.
gonna just okay. I'm just gonna address a bunch of things they said. Goons. He literally said in his statement that he's like putting into question the verse equalization and even the hypothetical of them like essentially like interacting. Like there's no even point in having the verse event in the first place if he's not okay with that default assumption, which he has to be by engaging in the debate in the first place. That's number one. That's like the clearest thing out of all of this. And I don't think he addressed a bunch of things that said earlier, which I find a little ridiculous. All I'm saying, and I've made it like pretty clear, and even said it himself, that if we are on the same axis, on the same timeline, right, we have to like. And again, I'm not being hyper literal. I said this earlier, Goons. I don't know if do you remember me saying that?
I do think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to clarify it again. I never hedged. I never dropped anything. I never like refined any of my claims. It's just the way I talk. I'm never being hyper literal. I'm okay with, the possibility aspect of it. I'm saying if our characters are on the same, axes and the same location undergoing a sequence of events, they're on a timeline. They're on the same timeline together, right? Now, him assuming, oh, we don't know how time works in my universe, so we can't say how, it flows. So
Oh,
the
brother. Oh,
so
brother.
okay, I don't know why he's getting unmuted. So the default definition that I've placed for what a timeline is just a sequence of events. I don't know if he's putting into question how time flows. If he is, I'd like to have a basis for my versus time flowing differently. If not, I'm going to dismiss his skepticism for being literally baseless. It's just baseless skepticism. That's one right there. Other than that, because we just undergo a sequence of events. That's how it just works regularly. Unless he's putting into question that it works in some very specific, different sort of way. So it'd be other than that, it's perfectly acceptable. Then we had that other point that he just made. So honestly, I think I addressed everything that he said. It's pretty clear what I'm trying to say. As long as I'm not hedging, he's not catching me out there, and he's not like dropping the way time flows. As long as we're on the same axis and same timeline. Again, it literally would have to be his burden right now, Goons, to prove his character like operates differently in time to be unaffected by it. Like that, I think I made that pretty abundantly clear. He's just like inserting a bunch of jargon nonsense, so he could respond to that.
Holy Yat Fest from Jester here. Oh my God. Ramble, ramble, ramble. So just to be clear, Goons, let me clarify something. The definition he grants and posits currently is not, at least we can determine whether or not that is the same definition that the verse uses. So yes, I grant hypothetically a timeline within a hypothetical verse can be a written account of events that is going on. But whether or not that shares the same properties as what his verse defines a timeline as is distinct. So if we grant that within the hypothetical verse, if there is some type of performative actions, which there is going to be, the characters fighting obviously, then that does not entail at all that systematically they are equivalent to the timelines within a verse. So like I said, within the verse, it can be a written account of events that also has X. And then X can be the trigger for the ability's effectiveness. If X is not equivocated to the system that allows for events within the hypothetical series or verse that these characters are fighting in, then no, it would not translate and the ability would not be effective. Another thing is, a lack of me granting the definition does not entail a lack of engagement. So I can not grant your definition, but we can still engage in a topic because my character can interact with yours. The only reason why you're saying it's normatively assumed is because of your prior debates with people like Dad Boy, Jester, Opal, all them shitty ass niggas. So just to be clear, I'm going to say it slowly for you. I don't grant your definition. I don't grant verse equalization. I don't need to grant verse equalization. I don't grant that it's normatively assumed that verse equalization is granted, etc. I don't need to grant any of this at all. What is the argument as to why we should grant it? What's the argument as to why it's assumed? There is no argument.
I think I've given the argument. I'm going to
again, I'm
conclusions.
not done. So,
You're good,
anyways,
continue.
if my character doesn't have an ability that is specifically targeting some type of power system, then yes, the characters can interact with each other without making the normative assumption correlative to power equalization. If Luffy just has a regular punch in which is able to destroy moons and the moon's size is calculated, we have a specific tier in range that Luffy's strength is calculated to. So we don't need verse equalization because the punch is not correlative to a specific power system in which no other character has. However, if the punch is correlative and contingent upon a specific power system, well then boo-hoo, my nigga. Unless you can explain why the properties aren't that distinct, I don't need to grant that the punch would be effective or ineffective. So yes, unless you give a definition that is grounded in your series, then we cannot equivocate the ability's effectiveness to the hypothetical verse unless you make an assumption, which I'm not positing the fact that you can make that assumption all free dilly-willy. And for the skepticism thing, the skepticism basis is just a lack of knowledge. I can use my lack of knowledge of your statement being true as a basis towards skepticism. That's the reason why I'm questioning it, due to a lack of knowledge of the proposition that you made being true.
Okay. So to address everything that he said, Goons, first off, that's a very insufficient basis for skepticism.
Yeah,
That
what's
gives
the
no.
argument? What's the argument for that?
I'm
Go
about
ahead.
to. I was about to give it to him, and you can mute him, please. So that's a very insufficient basis for skepticism, just basing on that you don't have knowledge of the verse. That sounds like a skill issue to me. The fact that you don't read my verse is insufficient reason for you to just dismiss legitimate sequences of time or how the properties of my verse works. You'd have to provide a little bit something more. That's my argument from that. So that's actually ridiculous. And to what you said earlier about the properties and why this punch wouldn't work against, we don't need verse equalization, and you don't know whether or not this verse should work. So, Goons, I'll ask you this as a judge. From what he's saying that he thinks it's possible. We don't need verse equalization, but he's unsure of the properties of either verse and if they could even interact with each other. So, but he said earlier that we are merging in a hypothetical scenario where we're in the same axes, we could interact and punch and fight with each other. So if he doesn't think that we can interact with each other because the properties are so significantly, it's either we can't interact with each other because our properties are so significantly different, which means we can't have the battle in the first place. You know what I'm saying, Goons?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one. Or, right, what he said earlier, we're in a hypothetical scenario where, even when we don't have to merge all the power sources, we can have different power sources. It's okay. As long as we're going under we're under the same chronological, movement of events, which I'm perfectly okay with. We'd have to be able to, if we're on the same like X axes and, at the minimum interacting with each other, this fight is even happening in the first place, we'd have to have at some minimum some merging or some equalization of the verse. So it's either this versus battle can't happen in the first place, and you're against with the versus battle even being possible at all, right? Or we're undergoing the same sequence of events, and our characters can interact unless your character has a magical ability that allows us not to. That's the most simple way to break down what he was saying. So it's either or. If it's the second one, then we can literally just move forward because it's getting absolutely ridiculous. And again, to write back on the skepticism point, lack of knowledge is not sufficient basis to dismiss that the sequence of events exist in my verse. You'd have to give me some type of reason or some type of like evidence as to why my verse's sequence of events or flow of time is so significantly different that it would literally make it like impossible to merge the timelines or for our characters to interact. That'd be ridiculous. It's a ridiculous claim. So you go ahead and address that.
Wait, so Goons, yeah, hold on. Well, Clicksu, can we all keep track of how many times he just repeated the same claim over and over again? All I'm hearing him is spout out propositions, not arguments, not reasons, but propositions. So just to be clear, Goons, there's multiple things. One, sharing a timeline does not mean you share the same events. You can share a timeline. The timeline is what codifies the events. So my character can have X event, his character can have Y event. Another thing is, I don't need to justify anything correlative to his verse. He is making a presupposition, because I don't know if you heard it, Goons. Confirm after I'm done. But He made the original premise, which was my character does X, Y, and Z. Does that not presuppose that his ability would be effective because he's assuming his character's able to do X, Y, and Z, correct?
I could see that being the case, sure.
Okay. Another thing is, I'm not unsure of how my verse works. I just gave a hypothetical in which there's an ability my character has that doesn't require it to target a specific power system. So even if I were not to grant verse equalization, there's still a hypothetical in which my character can use an ability that does not require targeting a specific power system. Like, for example, a punch, or for example, a Kamehameha wave. Nowhere in Dragon Ball does it state a Kamehameha wave only works against people with ki. Therefore, what can we assume, or what can we justify? We can justify the fact that it can work on anybody who is an entity. Obviously, that's obvious, my nigga. Another thing is, why is it an insufficient basis? You saying it isn't are you saying it is an insufficient basis? That's just a claim. What's the argument as to why it's an insufficient basis? Yes, I have a lack of knowledge on whether or not your propositions are true. So yes, I can put it into question. One, I don't even understand why skepticism needs a basis. Secondly, you have no argument as to why it is an insufficient basis. Thirdly, you making a claim that it's an insufficient basis due to me not reading the verse and having a skill issue. How is that a fucking argument? What's the inference rule there? Why is that a valid argument? Why is that a sound argument? Go ahead.
Is he done? Yeah. For the basis and skepticism thing, I'm gonna put it in the clearest possible example that I can to make anybody understand this. He's gonna say, "Oh, I don't think that's true. Why do you not think that's true? What's your basis for you not thinking that's true? Because I don't know about it. That doesn't follow through at all. I don't
Wait,
think
so
that's
just to be clear, I never
so.
made the
Okay,
claim it wasn't
no,
true. What I don't think is true. I'm putting into
no. I'm
question
making an
whether or not it
example.
is
So
true, Goons.
I'm making
So
an
wait,
example.
no, originally.
I know. So you're putting
Wait,
into question.
wait, hold on. Were you asking him to?
No. That was rhetorical. I'm explaining something. So I'm not saying that he's literally saying that it's not true, Goons. I'm just making an example of he's trying to dismiss something via skepticism, and via the basis of the skepticism would be his lack of knowledge of it. So he's trying to let's say he's trying to dismiss some X claim by saying I don't know enough about it, so I'm going to be skeptical about it, even though which is not which I've explained why it doesn't follow through, or why that's there's not enough grounds if I've shown information that time flows here. Humans interact normally with each other the way we do, so by the default we assume this. If he's trying to go against that default, he would have to give me sufficient evidence to why it flows differently in my dimension, right? That's just like a baseline, right? And I've seen nothing to show that. That's my argument for that. That's not a repeated claim at all. What he was saying earlier, and I said this too, Goons, if you remember this, I'm okay with us having different abilities and powers for different verses and punching each other. I'm perfectly okay with that. All I care about is our characters, interacting with each other if they're on the same axes. He gave a definition of timeline, which I think, all he did was jargon it, but I don't think he's ever legitimately. He says he disagrees with my definition, but Goons, did he ever give a legitimate definition that's completely different from what I've said is just a sequence of events?
It's not clear that he gave a definition of a timeline there.
Yeah.
Wait,
so
Infinity's not here, by the way.
Okay, that's right.
Yanni section.
When he gets back, I guess we can do closing statements.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to. I think we're in a circle.
Goons,
so.
Goons, bro.
Yo, what's up?
You should have forced conclusions 3 hours ago.
By the way, Cizo, I don't have the recording. I lost it. I deleted a bunch of my recordings. Somebody in Gangbook has that recording though. I don't know who it is.
Goons.
It's
is this
the
your
owner.
First fictional judge? As a judge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Have I ever debated Demi? No. Okay. No.
Yeah, I gotta watch my clothes soon.
Simply just don't care.
Bro. Niggas are weird in chat, bro. The real baby Kia just at me, are you a femboy?
No, we're just Tamaki, we're just going over the semantics of we're just going over the parameters of the versus battle debate. Since we don't agree to any, set thingy.
Bro, the next person who joins up this stage that's not debating or judging or moderating, you're timed for a week. Please remove yourself, please.
So the masterpiece, he doesn't agree to any set parameters, so we have to build them in the debate. No, I'm not using the reverse flash. I was using the reverse flash against the other. I forgot his name, but I'll do it after this debate. Yeah, this is gonna be a stamina. I mute him.
Okay, so one, just to be clear, I do grant that there is parameters. The parameter is going to be a hypothetical
I never
verse
said
in
there
which
weren't.
these two characters
I
fight. Yeah,
never
please,
said
can you
there
please
weren't.
mute him? I don't understand why I was
You don't
muted
have to mute
instantly
me,
every
bro.
single time.
Fuck,
Every single time I speak, I'm muted instantly. But as soon as he speaks, he gets like 50 fucking seconds to finish.
I was typing
Anyway.
in chat. I was saying that I wasn't mismoderating. I didn't know you were back. You retarded.
Yeah, so Goons, just to be clear, I never made the proposition that I'm able to dismiss what he said due to a lack of knowledge. Secondly, he keeps on saying it's an insufficient basis. There's no argument as to why it's an insufficient basis. Thirdly, I want to repeat every single thing that he said while I was going. I tried to type in chat that I was going, but Archie being a poor moderator didn't say that for some reason. I typed it 80,000 times. Archie, you'll be victim. Anyways. Hold on. I'm not done, by the way.
Bubbles victim, bubbles victim, bubbles victim, bubbles victim.
Anyways, the fuck.
Oh, by the way, Infinity, we're doing conclusions.
Well, I did not agree to that. What the fuck? You can't just have this nigga give arguments while I'm not here and then conclude. I knew this nigga was gonna hold me over, bro.
Oh, I didn't know you were not there, so we don't have to do conclusions if you don't want to.
Just to be clear, I grant the definition of timelines that he's using. I agree that a timeline is just some type of system in which codifies hybrid points. However, whether or not that's what the verse uses is distinct, Goons. I know you don't do crosswords, so I'm going to clarify. Our definitions does not have to be the same as the author's definitions. The author's definitions can be clarified within the verse in which he's obviously creating. So the author can define matter as X, Y, and B, and we can define matter as Y, Z, N, A, etc. Those are two distinct definitions. When we're talking about verses and interpreting verses, giving our own analysis so we can see who wins between the two characters, we're going off of what the author defines abilities as, what the author defines cosmological features as, etc. Not what we define them as, or if we do not have a clear depiction of what they define it as, we can go off of normative assumptions. But guess what, Goons? We can't determine whether or not what he's saying is a normative assumption for the verse or for fiction. All he's doing is granting a term in which we do not have any argument for. So if the ability, and I'm going to say this for a last time so you don't hold me over, even though I still believe you're going to hold me over. If we grant that within this verse, the timeline has X, Y, and B property and the ability is directly interactive with B in which allows the consequence to be fulfilled, then if there's a hypothetical verse in which these timelines exist in, but in a distinct way where it does not have B, the ability would not be effective because there's no B, which is the antecedent to allow the consequent, which is the abilities, whatever the ability does to happen. Now, he's saying I need to point out a distinction between the timelines in his verse and a timeline with my verse. He is so ass, he can't even tell me what the timelines in his verse account for. He's telling me what he believes they account for. But has he sent evidence, Goons? No, he has not sent a single piece of evidence. So I'm going to wait for the evidence. Then we can conclude after this. By the way, if he doesn't say anything after this, we can conclude. But I'm going to wait for the evidence for why the timelines are not distinct. That is the claim he made. That's the presupposition he made. He made the claim that I need to send some type of justification, which I don't at all, because that was his presupposition. I'm just asking why this follows. Why is this sound? He doesn't even know what a sound argument is. And just to be clear, like I said, repeat everything you said, or else it's just getting dismissed.
By the way, Jester is server muted.
Shout out to Mono.
Okay, that was ridiculous, but to make it clear before he tries to interrupt me, make rhetorical jabs, can you just mute him instantly right now? Because this is what he's been doing consistently. So I'll respond to everything right now in a second. Like he was just explaining. Archie here?
Shout out to Flames.
Yeah. Archie, hello? Is Archie
we
gone?
agree to Sakazuki as my.
This shit's getting out of hand. Okay. I think after just we're gonna go to conclusion.
Shout out to Shin.
Okay, this is absurd.
Yo, hello. Should I moderate? I think Archie died.
Yeah. Can you just mute him?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see which one we gotta go over first. So I'm happy he grants my definition. So we're free off that. He's basically saying that it's possible, and this from what I'm getting from his argument, he's saying that it's possible that there are some different parameters with how time works in my verse. I'm saying that, the author has shown me none of that. Uh, and why we assume default is because all we see is people on Earth interacting normally, like we see in our world. So we just assume there's just a baseline flow of time. If he's saying that there are some parameters that are so different in his verse that when we merge in this timeline, my character can't use his ability, that's his burden to prove that. I have nothing to do with that. He'd have to have a burden to prove that. He's skeptical of how time nerds. He says, "Oh, they always explain how time works specifically." I don't think that's necessarily true. They just show a sequence of people fighting and interacting. So we just go under our normal. That's how we go under our normal assumption of time is just flowing. If there's no set rate or speed, if he's saying that it's some different set rate or speed, or he's skeptical that there's some different set rate or speed or some different properties of how time flows in my verse, I'd have to have a basis for that as well, for that skepticism or some evidence or something. You know what I'm saying, Goons? I'd have to see, some evidence for the parameters of how time flows in his verse. That'd be a little, why it would be inconsistent for my ability to not work. All I've really claimed is that my character is able to interact with a sequence of events, and there would be a sequence of events undergoing in this hypothetical situation, which is what I argued as the definition of what verse equalization is, Goons, and that's all I really wanted. So I'm happy he agrees with the definition, so we agree there. And so now we get into the point of, are there too many different parameters in our verses that will not, when they equalize, will let my character not able to interact with it? So I want to see a basis for the skepticism. Again, or why he even thinks time could flow. Or I'm okay with the possibility of time, like in any verse flowing differently. But first off, when they equalize in the same setting, we're moving at the same set rate, and what I'm saying, Goons? We're moving at the same set rate unless the characters, we have to argue speed after. But at a baseline, when we're moving on the same axis, time is flowing the same where we're at. So that just gets evened out. So it's either he's saying that the properties are so different in his verse and mine that when they equal out, I can't use my ability anymore, or it's the opposite where we're on the same property, everything evens out, and my character is able to still use his ability. He's given like no real reason as to why my character like can't use his ability here. It's kind of a lot of yappery. So that was pretty much about it. He's just saying like, oh, they should give specific definitions for how time flows, but I'm just saying we have some example of how time flows normally, which is just sequence of events. He'd have to give me some evidence for a different set rate or change in my verse, or the different parameters of his. So I want to see some evidence for that, or if anything, we can just go to conclusions.
He's so spaz. So please mute him, Sakazuki. So just to be clear, systematic codification of time or hybrid points is distinct from a written account of events. You're presupposing, and just to be clear, I granted that you can use the definition of timelines. You can use it. Whether or not the author's depiction of what a timeline is within his verse is the same, no, I do not grant that. What is the argument as to why the author grants that your definition is true, why it's likely that he grants is true, or why we should even normatively assume that we grant or that he grants is true? The argument you just gave, I don't believe it logically follows. What's the inference rule? You said empirically, if we see people having interactive power with each other within a verse, that is justification for the system being the same, or that's justification as to why we should assume that the system being the same. However, empirical validation of existing properties is not an argument as to why the non-existing properties are there. So you can say it exists, that's of interactive power between two characters, but whether or not that justifies there not being an X property and which allows your character to have an effective ability against the timeline is distinct. So I can see that people are moving. Does that justify that the system doesn't have X property? No. So the system allows for Y, which is moving. We see that people moving, so we can biconditionally verify that the system allows for Y. Y equals moving. Now, does us seeing that the system allows for moving justifies the fact that there's a lack of X property, which is the property which allows another character to come to this timeline or whatever? No, it doesn't. The only thing positive justification accounts for is a lack of non-existing properties, a lack of the negation. So if we verify that X is the case, then obviously biconditionally not X would not be the case. However, not X and Y are two different things. So it can be X and Y. It does not have to be not X and X. That's a contradiction. Anyways, another thing is,
Are you done or did you die?
My bad. So I grant verse equalization in a sense of the character sharing a verse. The verse is equalized in a sense they share a verse in which they can fight in, if they're on the same axes. I do not grant verse equalization in a sense where they can have interactive power between each other. Just for them to be in the same verse doesn't mean they have to have interactive power. For example, we can see in Dragon Ball, Zeno doesn't need to interact with Goku to share the same verse with him. He chooses to, but whether or not he needs to is a different claim. Stop making all these claims about necessity. I already gave a basis towards my skepticism. For you to dismiss it and say it isn't a basis just presupposes that it's either one sufficient or it isn't a basis in the first place. I'm asking you why it isn't sufficient, and unless you gave an argument while I was going, which I'm dismissing since I wasn't here for, by the way, and you're not repeating it, unless you gave an argument for while I was going, I'm not accepting the argument at all. I'm not accepting that it's an insufficient basis. So obviously you're just going to presuppose that the skepticism does not hold if you presuppose the insufficient basis is there, but the point of contention is whether or not it's an insufficient basis. So my character can have an ability X in which can interact with your character, while ability Y is specifically contingent upon something your character doesn't have. Therefore, there's no interactive power between your opponents and Y, but we still have interactive power overall between the two characters. Just specific properties cannot interact with each other. Idiots, it's simple as that. Would you like to conclude? Holy shit.
Yeah, I don't think he really addressed anything I was already saying. I don't think he addressed any of my skepticism either. So I'm gonna go to conclusions. You think we're gonna go, right, Goons?
Okay, and just to be
gonna
hold on,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to be clear, before we conclude, Goons, all he did was beg the question the entire time, no Gios. But yeah, come on, go on.
I want to get a closing statement.
Sure, and I.
Go ahead, Jester.
I'm going
give
first?
Yeah.
No, I think Infinity was about to go. That's what you said was. I mean, are you about to go?
Oh, okay. There you go, Infinity.
Well, I was, but you can go since you know they want you to go so bad.
All right, bro. Now we're not gonna be little 12-year-old girls about this. All right, Infinity. Like, my bad, bro. My bad for muting you. Go ahead, bro. Like, I don't care who conclusion goes. All right, Jester, you can go ahead. I don't think he wants to.
He doesn't want to go. Okay. So let me see how I could best sum this up. I put all his skepticism essentially. I asked for a basis. He said lack of knowledge, and we dive into the fact that since his lack of knowledge is, I believe it's insufficient. The reason why I gave is we go back onto the actual argument, which is what we had, what we see happening in DC. So he asked for a very specific definition. I just say we see humans interacting with each other normally. So we see sequence of events. He says it's, it's possible that there could be some different properties, which I immediately like, yeah, it's possible, but what's your basis for, there being significant different properties from your verse and our verse that doesn't allow our characters to interact? I put at least 2 burden of proofs on him to give like examples of some like outrageously different properties that won't allow our characters to interact from my verse. From all we see, actual definition from the author, he said all the author could think this and that. I already explained that, just, and he never denied this, is from showing Earth. And this is a closing statement. This is a conclusion. I won't be too long. I'm just gonna end it up real quick. From I just coughed something up. Yeah. So from what the author shows, pretty much it's characters on Earth interacting with each other. We just see sequence of events. He puts into question.
He's lost. He's lost. He's lost. Okay. He's lost. Oh my god.
Okay. Bro, niggas can't cough anymore? Damn, bro. I can't have allergies? Okay. Is that it? Okay, whatever. Yeah, so he never elaborated upon the insufficient basis. He kind of just went in a circle. I'll make that clear. So I think I won that point. Him basically agreeing with what my definition of verse equalization was and timeline, and he never responds to the argument where I said all my character is able to do is interact with a sequence of events. So him granting that there's a sequence of events going on, unless he gives some evidence of some very significant property from his verse to my verse when they equalize, that doesn't allow my character to use his ability, he's cooked and loses that point like immediately. So everything that he said was pretty much yappery. We got down to the nitty gritty of it. We set some parameters. He didn't really establish anything. He just gave a lot of really baseless skepticism that's based on lack of knowledge, which I said is insufficient, essentially on what the default was. So I showed him what the default was, what the default assumption would be in comparison to our world. The author writes human beings in comparison to our world, interacting events. Unless there's something significantly different that he could prove or point out without any like legitimate basis skepticism that I put into question earlier, he really loses this point. So it's pretty cooked.
I don't. Please mute him. Thank you. So just to be clear, go. My bad. Hold on, my bad. Hold on. Give me a second. So just to be clear, he kept putting burdens. He kept putting burdens on me, but when I asked him why the burdens, I had to justify. He did. He didn't give an argument as to why the burdens I need to justify it all. He didn't give an argument as to why I needed to justify the burdens that he placed upon me. I asked him why my basis was insufficient. So like I said, unless he gave an argument while I was going, which I said I was going to dismiss, and he had no problem with that. By the way, he never commented on me dismissing anything that he said while I was going. I said unless he gave an argument as to why it's an insufficient basis, then when he makes the comments an insufficient basis, therefore I don't have any basis to my skepticism. That would be a presupposition. Like I said, he made multiple presuppositions. He didn't justify any presuppositions. I don't need to justify any burden because he made the original presupposition within his premise. His premise was his character is able to go into my timeline and erase my character either 10 years or his existence. I asked why that would be the case or would be effective. He kept on using the consequent. I agree the consequent is there, but the antecedents was put the point of contention is. So how does he do this thing? We agree that he does this thing within this verse, but how does he do this thing? Also for the normative assumption thing, when he said that it's normatively assumed in respect to reality, when I kept on questioning why it's normatively assumed, what did he do? It's normatively assumed. It's normatively assumed. Repetition isn't justification. That is no motivation for a rational thinker at all. There's no argument for that. But yeah, although I didn't conclude on everything that was said, I believe hopefully you were tracking. I already know I'm going to get hold over, but I just hope you were tracking, God.
Yeah, did you want me to give like my judgment now?
Yeah, Goons, give your judgment.
Yes,
that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So, I mean, basically, the way that I was doing this is like every single time that I saw either one of you, make a good move, I would add points, and every single time I saw one of you make a bad point or say something stupid or not do something that was rhetorically effective, I would like take a point away. So what I've done here is I've like tallied it up, and I mean what I have, like the results is it's a tie. Like you both are like super effective like rhetorically. I think there was a lot going on there, but I mean I literally couldn't lean one way or another. I mean we can do like a poll or something, but I have a tie here. I mean they were both really good. Yeah.
Yes, this is what I'm saying, bro. Like, this is really the rivalry of all time in this combo.
No, I mean they're both really good, right? They're both like good rhetoricians, so.
For sure, I agree. All right.
Do you want? I mean, we can ask them if they want to do a poll or something, and then
I'll mute both of them. So, do you guys want to do a poll?
This is why I don't agree to judges. Like, look, just to clarify, please mute up while I'm speaking. He can speak after me. So, one, yes, we can do a poll. This nigga got hold. And then, secondly, thank you. So, one, we can do a poll. I'm pretty confident that this nigga got slammed, and everybody who actually thinks that. And then, secondly, hold on. And then, secondly, anyways. And then, secondly, can you judge off argumentation? I don't care about rhetoric. I wasn't rhetorically trying. We literally agree to moderation. I can't rhetorically be at my best, but like I said, can you just go off argumentation? Who won argumentatively?
Yeah. Again, it's still gonna be a tie for me.
Okay, do a poll. Sakazuki, do a poll for the tournament. Jester doesn't even have to agree since our judge is not giving judgment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously it's gonna be a poll for the tournament, but I'm just asking for like official shit. If Jester, do you want?
No, this guy like insta wins every poll. He has so many fucking dick riders.
What? That's not even true. Are you dumb? So, just because I'm better than you in literally every single way doesn't mean that it's biased or anything. People just consider me better than you because you fucking suck. Look, I know you're from a com where people like Dad Boy. I know you're from a com where people who spurg or value highly, but no, this is.
You know, I type in chat and you flew in chat like Superman. Jester, debate me, please. I need to debate Jester. Like every single day, you hop on my dick 24/7. This shit's even funny, bro. Like you jumped and you flew in like Superman. Like you flew the debates. Don't serve me. Give my friend back. Don't let him perm me. Don't let him perm me. He wants to pack. I want to pack. Let's pack.
Wait, hold on. Jester, one sec. I muted him. Y'all can pack whatever right after this. All I'm saying is that officially for this debate, like just like outside of you guys like counting this as a win or loss, he can go as a tie because your judge says a tie. But I'm saying for the tournament itself, right? Either you can accept the tie, right, and I can give both of you a point, right? Or if you want to try to get the win, I can just do a poll.
No, I'm not done. I'm just taking the tie. That's okay.